Hello friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC lecture once again. Dear friends, as you know that we talk on different subjects, different topics, and for the students of the environmental sciences, we would like to tell you all that today we are going to talk on one of the most interesting topics. You may or may not have heard about this term, but after listening this lecture, you will be well familiarized with the topic as well as with the content which we are going to deliver today. Dear friends, in this session today, we are going to discuss on ISO 14,000. What is ISO 14,000? So, for your brief introduction, for this brief introduction towards this lecture, which is going to be delivered further, it is one of the environmental standards. I know that curiosity level inside you has been increased, and you might be thinking, what kind of environmental standard ISO 14,000 is? So, dear friends, we are going to introduce to you to Dr. Arun Kumar Srivastav, who is Assistant Professor in School of Environmental Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, who is going to give us in-depth knowledge on ISO 14,000. So, without wasting any time, I would like to welcome our guest, Dr. Arun Kumar Srivastav, under whose able guidance we are going to understand this very topic. So, welcome to the EduSet lecture, sir.
Thank you very much.
So, as I too have heard this term for the first time, and after knowing through you that it is one of the environmental standards, that is ISO 14,000, kindly explain us in detail what kind of environmental standard it is.
Okay, good afternoon viewers. Today I will deliver a talk on ISO 14001. I think you might have heard of ISI, egg marks, etc. etc. It actually represents the compliance of the different goods what we use for various purposes, whether it or they meet the standards or requisite requirements, whether it has to be consumed or whether it has to be utilized for various purposes or not. So, in that context, in the series of that like egg marks and ISI, for environmental standards or whether to know if any institute, any organization, any factory, any industry is compliant with the environmental standards or not, it is certified by a mark that is known as ISO 14,000. In fact, ISO 14,000 is a group of standards. It is comprised by many standards. We will be discussing in details later on. First, I must tell you what actually ISO is. You should be aware of ISO actually. ISO basically stands for International Organization for Standardization, and in fact, it is the reverse term here. It should be International Standardization Organization, but usually we call it as International Organization for Standardization. This ISO story actually began way back in 1946 when delegates from 25 different countries met at the Institute of Civil Engineers in London and decided to create a new international organization to facilitate the international coordination and unification of industrial standards. Initially, I must tell you, the very formation of this was about or keeping in view about the industries or factories, but later on nowadays this ISO is required for many other institutes, whether they are to whether it hardly matters they are anyhow related to industries or not, or whether they are producing any industrial products or not. If it is an educational institute, if it is some organization or anything else, it has to be complied, it has to have the ISO compliances. Now, in detail what ISO is, actually it is an independent non-governmental organization. It was founded on 23rd February 1947. Its headquarters is in Geneva, Switzerland, the members of which are the standard organization of the 164 member countries. Its official languages are English, French and Russian. It is the world's largest developer of voluntary international standards and facilitates world trade by providing common standards between nations. Nearly 20,000 standards have so far been set, covering everything from manufacturing products and technology to food safety, agriculture and healthcare. ISO has published over 19,500 international standards covering almost all aspects of technology and manufacturing. Its members are not, as in the case in the United Nations system, delegation of national government. Here I must mention that it is an in absolute term it is a private or it is a non-governmental organization. It has nothing to do with the government sector, or I mean the countries which are the part of this organization, they are not necessarily supposed to be the part of government of that respective country. Nevertheless, ISO occupies a special position between the public and private sectors, and in mark of this ISO, there is a day every year, and that is known as World Standard Day, which is celebrated every year on 14th October. On the one hand, many of its member institutes are part of the governmental structure of their countries or are mandated by the government. I mean, it is on the one hand, its members institutes are the part of the governmental structure. They could be the part of the governmental structure of that respective country, or they can be mandated by their respective governments. On the other hand, other members have their roots uniquely in the private sector, having been set up by the National Partnership of Industries Associations. Therefore, ISO is able to act as a bridging organization in which a consensus can be reached on solutions that meet both the requirements of businesses and broader needs of society, such as the needs of stakeholders groups like consumers and users. What does it mean actually? What I explained in the previous slides, that actually it on the one hand it somehow related to the governmental organization. I mean, it could be the person who is involved in this, he could be directly from the governmental sector, or he could be the representative of the government sector, and on the other hand the persons can also be from the industrial sector or the person who has been designated or nominated by the Association of Industries. So, this is why this ISO is also a bridging factor for the governmental as well as private or industrial sectors, and that is why we can say the ISO is able to act as a bridging organization in which consensus can be reached on solution that meet both the requirements of businesses and the broader needs of society, such as the need of stakeholder groups like consumers and users. We have been speaking about standards many times, but I must mention what actually these standards in respect to ISO mean. Now, as far as standards are concerned, international standards mark things to work. They give world class specification for products, services and system to ensure quality, safety and efficiency. They are instrumental in facilitating international trade. Now, the next question is, who develops ISO standards? I mean, where actually ISO standards are developed. ISO standards are developed by technical committees comprising experts from the industrial, technical and business sectors, which have asked for the standards and which subsequently put them to use. These experts may be joined by representatives of governmental agencies, testing laboratories, consumers association, non-governmental organizations and academic circles. I mean, there are various organizations including governmental agencies, labs, consumer association, etc., like non-governmental organizations. They all meet together to develop the ISOs of that particular type of category. The experts participate as national delegations chosen by the ISO National Members Institute for the country concerned. These delegations are required to represent not just the views of the organizations in which their participating experts work, but of other stakeholders too. The national delegations of experts of a technical committee meet to discuss, debate and argue until they reach consensus on a draft agreement. This is circulated as a draft international standard, which is also abbreviated as DIS, to ISO members as a whole for comment and balloting. Many members have public review procedures for making draft standards known and available to interested parties and to the general public. The ISO members then take account of any feedback they receive in formulating their position on the draft standards. If the voting is in the favor, the document with eventual modifications, if modifications are required, if it is not required, they will go ahead. If modifications are required, it will be done, and afterwards it is circulated to the ISO members as final draft international standards, and it is also known as FDIS. If that vote is positive, during balloting, if the vote is positive, then the document is gone for the publication, and which afterwards it becomes a ISO of that particular category. It is published as an international standard of that particular category. Now, what are the different stages for the development of ISO process? Now, here I have given in this table the different stages with their codings, how the ISO standards are developed. Now, the first stage, the very first stage, which has a stage code of 00, it is also known as preliminary stage. The type of work, what is done in this category or in this stage is, it is basically the preliminary work of the item, and it is usually abbreviated as PWI. The second stage, which has a code of 10, it is the next stage and it is called as proposal, and what is done in this new work item is proposed. According to the requirement or according to the development, that category is modified, and for that modification definitely something new is to be added, and that is why it is known as the new work item proposal, and it can be abbreviated as NP or NWIP. The next stage is preparatory stage, which has a code 20, and in this actually drafting work is done. Work on draft is done there, and it is abbreviated as AWI or WD, while the next stage, that is fourth stage, is the committee stage, and its stage code is 30, and what is done in this actually, in this committee actually drafts the document. It is not done by an individual or a group, but an entire committee represented, or entire committee which is being represented from various sector, various communities, and that committee actually draft that document, and this is abbreviated as CD or PD. The next stage is inquiry stage. Its stage code is 40, and here the inquiry of the draft is done. This is abbreviated as DIS or FCD, and afterwards the next stage is approval stage, which has a code of 50, and here what is done, the draft takes the final shape. It is also known as, it is abbreviated as FDIS or PRF, and when the final draft is done, final documentation is done, then the next stage, which is publication stage, is it comes, and the code of that particular stage is 60. Then, and the type of work which is done is, then we'll have to check before publication that the final draft actually meets the international standards or not. If it meets the international standard with the recommendation, with the consensus of representatives from various countries, from various sectors, from various organizations, then we will say that the draft has taken the form of ISO or international standards, and this code and this abbreviation of this particular stage is ISO. So, finally, we come up with a resolution. It is in the form of ISO, which meets all the international requisite standards, and it is now the complete process. Afterwards, if required, the review stage is there, which has a code of 90. I must say that it is done when the requirement is there, and if during review it is found that there is some problem or there is a need of amendment, then it should be withdrawn. So, withdrawn is the next stage, or we will say it is actually the last stage. After withdrawal of that draft which has a code of 95, then we again go for the requisite, whatever the requirements could be. If it is supposed to go to the first stage or top stage with the code 00, then we will have to start from there. Otherwise, if it is required that no, it should go to the second stage which has the code of 10, then we will go to the second stage. So, we will say that the cycle again begins, cycle is again starts. So, whatever what it means actually, then we will have to follow the entire process again, and if it is done, then it is approved. If it is not done, then again we will have to go through the withdrawal process. So, cycle continues until we finally come up with a resolution which meets all the international requisite standards. Then it is finally published and it goes for the now it can be used for the public in general. Now, I will give you some information about the ISO in figures, and it is, this data is for the year 2014. In fact, amendments have already been for the 2015, but a holistic data of until 2014 is available. As far as the member countries of this ISO is concerned, there are 165 national standard bodies. Out of them, 119 are the member bodies, 42 are the correspondent members, 4 are the subscriber members, and there are 3,511 technical bodies. Among them, 238 are the technical committees, 521 are the subcommittees, 2,592 are the working groups, 168 are the ad hoc study groups. Now, I think I have already told that there are over 20,000 or approximately 20,000 publication different portfolios have come as far as ISO standards are concerned. So, here is the breakup of those 20,000 publications along different sector wise. As far as the different sectors are concerned, the largest publication or the largest works have been carried out in the field of engineering technologies. So, out of those all publications, 27.4% is for the engineering technologies, while 22.7% is for the material technologies. So, I will say approximately 50% of the total publications as far as the ISO standards are concerned, it is for engineering technologies and material technologies. Rest 50% are for other technologies which consist of electronics, information technology and telecommunication, which actually have the share of 17.1%. Next one is transport and distribution of goods sector, which has a contribution of 10.6%, whilst the infrastructure, science and services, it has the share of 9.3%. Agriculture and food technology has a share of 5.6%. Health, safety and environment has just 4%. In fact, this 4% is where we will be discussing today, or which is the topic of our discussion, that is ISO 14,000 and its various different categories. The next one is construction sector, where the publication, where 2.5% of the total publications have been done, and recently developed some special technology like nano, etc., etc. So, it just has a share of 0.8%. So, it was the distribution of the publications or the standards which have been developed according to the different sectors. Now, I must give you some information about, general information about different ISOs, although our topic of discussion is ISO 14,000, which pertains to the environmental sector, but I just now discussed about the ISO, what actually ISO is, how it is met, how it is met, and various different things which are required to understand ISO 14000. But before we go into the details of ISO 14000, I must give you information about some of the very important ISOs which are not actually related to environment or environmental sector, but they are also necessary that the readers or the viewers should know about the different ISO. One of the very important ISOs is ISO 9000. It's field of, it basically belongs to the field which is known as quality management. And what does it do actually? It makes sure your products and services meet the customer's need. The next one is ISO 14000, which belongs to the environmental management sector. It actually pertains, or it actually explains about how the environment of that organization, or whether that particular organization is taking care of the environment presently and will take care of the environment in future or not. The next one is ISO 3166 or ISO 3166. It actually pertains to the country codes. So what does it do? It actually avoids, with the help of this, we can avoid the confusion when referring to countries and their subdivisions. Next is ISO 22000. It actually pertains to food safety management. What does it do? It actually inspires the confidence in your food products. The next one is ISO 26000. It basically pertains to the social responsibility. It helps your organization to operate in a socially responsible way. Whether we are meeting the norms of society or we are following the social requirements or not, these things are described in detail in ISO 26000. The next one is ISO 5000, ISO 50001. It actually pertains to the energy management. It makes energy savings and help making your organization more energy efficient. So ISO 50001, it actually pertains to, it describes how an organization can be efficient as far as energy consumption, energy uses, etc. are concerned. Afterwards, the next one is ISO 31000. What does it do? It actually pertains to risk management. It tells how to manage the risks, and that could be negative for your company's performance. If there is any risk factor, so how it should be managed, otherwise the performance can go in negative directions. Next one is ISO 42070. It actually pertains to currency code. It basically avoids the confusion when we have to we refer to currencies of different countries. The next one is ISO 639. It basically belongs to language codes. It describes languages in an internationally accepted ways. Afterwards is ISO 20121. It pertains to sustainable events. It actually tells us how to manage the social, economic and environmental impacts of your events. Suppose, if there is some kind of event which is going to be organized, so we will have to follow the norms of ISO 20121. What does it actually mean? I must explain you. Suppose there is an event management group, and actually here what do? We call them for managing our events, but we always forget whether that event management group is following the standard in internationally accepted standards or not. If it is following the internationally accepted standards, then it must be complied with the ISO 20121. So if it is having the compliance with ISO 20121, it means that if that event management group is performing or doing something somewhere else, then it will manage things keeping in mind the society, the economy and our environment. So, these are, I mean, the next one we can understand in a better way if we complete this. The next one is ISO 27001. It pertains to information security. It ensures your organization's information is secure or not. It is basically recently developed standards. I mean, organizations are somehow in some matters they are supposed to maintain the confidentiality, and if that organization is ISO 27001 compliant, it means that organization can maintain its secrecy or can have it is secured in many aspects. The next one is ISO 45001. It pertains to occupational health and safety. What does it say actually? It reduces workplace risk and creates safer working environment. I mean, if there are organization which might have some risk and which is not having safety, which is not compliant with the safety techniques or safety measures, then we'll say that this company is not having the compliance with ISO 45001. If it is having, it means it is following all the requisite safety norms and working there is safer. I mean, it could be danger from anything else. So, and this ISO 45001 tells all those risk factors which can be there and how to overcome or how to tackle those risk factors. So, these were, so far we were discussing about different ISOs, I mean what ISOs are, what are the different categories or different type of ISO. We discussed some 10, 12 different ISOs, but the topic of our discussion is mainly ISO 14000, which actually pertains or which is related to the environmental sector, and now we will discuss that particular topic. Now, ISO 14000, it is also known as EMS, abbreviated as EMS or Environmental Management System. Now, what this ISO 14000 is? The ISO 14000 is basically a family of standards which provide practical tools for companies and organizations of all kinds looking to manage their environmental responsibilities. ISO 14001 2015, it focused on environmental systems to achieve what I said just now. The other standards in the family focus on, I mean, this ISO 14000 is not a single standard, or it is basically a group of standard. It is comprised by many different standards we will discuss in detail, and those standard altogether makes a company compliance with ISO 14000. The other standards in the family focus on specific approaches such as audits, communications, labeling and life cycling analysis, as well as environmental challenges such as climate change, etc. The main thrust for its development came as a result of the Rio Summit on Environment, which was held in 1992. The ISO 14000 series is similar to basically ISO 9000, which was published in 1987. The purpose of this ISO 9000 series is to encourage organization to institute quality assurance and management. In fact, this ISO 9000 was also pertaining to quality assurance, and this 14000 is also somehow related to quality assurance, but that quality actually should be in compliance with the sustainable environmental development or sustainable environmental management. Both actually pertains to the process of how a product is produced rather than to the product itself. One more thing I must tell you, that in the beginning only I said that we had been hearing about EGMARC, ISI, etc., etc. these are the marks that you will always see on the various products, and afterwards you say that the things which is in compliance with egg mark or ISI is consumable, or it can be consumed. It will not cause any harm, or it has met all the requisite norms and standards. So we will say that this egg mark and ISI, etc., they are basically related to the end product. I mean, they are given this mark when the product is completed and when the product is to go in the hands of consumers. But in case of ISO, this is not related to the end product, but it is related to the process. I mean, the difference between those things, I mean, ISI and egg mark and ISO is, one is related to the end product, while the other, I mean, ISO are related to the processes. I mean, if we are to produce something, whether we are following the exact or requisite process which is internationally accepted or not, then if we are following it, then we will say that we are compliant with the ISO. And similarly, during that process mechanism, actually, if we are taking care of environment, then we will say that we are following the ISO 14000. Now, I have already told that both pertains to the processes of how a product is produced rather than to the product itself. Although ISO 9000 deals with the overall management of an organization and ISO 14000 deals with the management of the environmental effects of an organization, both standards are concerned with the processes. There is a talk of combining the two series into one. Both series of standards stem from concerns about international trade. I must tell you that sometimes back the things were, I mean, being produced from a country, and most of it were being consumed by the countryman itself, I mean, in that particular country only. But later on the realization came that it is not good, or it is not possible. I mean, the goods should go from one place to the other. I mean, the international trade has been flourished, and it is at its high, you can say at its top. But the thing was that if some of the things which were produced by one country and it was good for that particular country's citizen, but it was not largely accepted by the other countries. And that is why, to keep all these in mind, this ISO etc. were developed, so that the goods which are produced, I mean, during the process of production, it is following an authentic rule, authentic process, so that it can be accepted by that particular country and those countries' citizen by whom it was not accepted earlier. So, both series of standards stemmed from concerns about international trade. So, this is also a very good, I mean, thing, keeping in mind the international trade. If something which is in compliance with ISO 14000, it can easily be accepted by some other country or the citizens or organization of that country. Now, what actually this ISO 14000 tells? Actually, this new series of ISO 14000 standards are designed to cover environmental management system, environmental auditing, environmental performance evaluation, environmental labeling, life cycle assessment, environmental aspect in product standards. No. The next one is why to have these standards. Why it is whether it is required to have these standards? Yes, basically a set of international standards bring worldwide focus on the environment, encouraging a cleaner, safer, healthier world for all of us. The existence of the standards allows organizations to focus environmental efforts against an internationally accepted criteria. At present, Many countries and regional groups are generating their own requirements for environmental issues, and these vary between the groups. Actually, each country claim that they are following the environmental standards for their own products, and sometimes these statements can be exaggerated to hide things so that the products or the process of production cannot be hampered. But if that particular company is following the ISO norms, it means that country is, that particular organization is not exaggerating things, but they are following the international standards. In continuation to that, a single standard will ensure that there should not be any conflict between regional interpretations of good environmental practices. What I have described, that this is how after following these international standards, the question of international conflict between these conflicts either at regional level or country level, keeping in mind environment will be at their minimum level. Now, the fact that companies may need environmental management certification to compete in the global marketplace could easily overshadow all ethical reasons for environmental management. Within Europe, many organizations gained ISO 9000 registrations primarily to meet growing demands for customers. So, what does it actually mean? In Europe, sometimes PAC, just to have just to have their production at a very high speed, because the demands from the citizens were growing at a very high speed and they will have to produce the things. So, they anyhow try to gain ISO 9000 so that their demand by the citizens for those products should not be hampered, but in fact it was not a good practice. So, I think with this today we would like to wind it up now, and the remaining parts we will I think it has come, there was some technical problems, so we can continue. ISO 9000 quality registration has become necessary to do business in many areas of commerce. Similarly, ISO 14000 management system registration may become the primary requirement for doing businesses in many regions or industries. Now, who do the standards apply to, and where these standards actually should be applied? The standards apply to all types and sizes of organizations and are designed to encompass diverse geographical, cultural and social conditions. For ISO 14001, except for committing to continual improvement and compliance with applicable legislations and regulations, the standards does not establish absolute requirements for environmental performance. Many organizations engaged in similar activities may have widely different environmental management systems and performance and may all comply with ISO 14001. This is primarily for the company to decide and to clearly document the extent of coverage. However, limiting coverage to a small area may provide competitors with an ideal marketing opportunity. There does not appear to be a limit to the coverage of the environmental management system, in that it can include the organization's products, services, activities, operations, facilities, transportation, etc. From a slightly different viewpoint, all of the elements in the previous sentences should be considered for environmental impact resulting from current practices, past practices and future practices, and should further be reviewed for their impact under normal, abnormal and emergency conditions. Now, so far we discussed about ISO, what ISO exactly is, what were the processes of its development and how in fact it was developed, and later on we also had some idea about different type of ISOs, what it covers, where does it actually pertains to, and later on we also had some idea about ISO 14000 as far as definitions, broader definitions and broader ideas are concerned. Tomorrow or in the next class we will rather have some detailed information about the ISO 14000, how it is obtained, what are the different processes for obtaining ISOs or different categories of ISOs.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much for giving us a productive session where we try to understand about ISO 14000. And now let's have some question answer round so that it becomes easy for the students to understand the topic as a whole. So, if we talk about in a common man terms about the ISO 14000, as you tried to explain it with the other standard parameters also like ISI. So, could we say that any organization, any company, any brand which is working and its working could hamper the environment is required to have ISO 14000?
In fact, I don't know whether government has mandated this, Indian government, but in foreign countries many organizations or factories or industries, they'll have to be they have to have the compliance with ISO. What it actually means that suppose like we have any product that is eatable, I mean, then we see that if it is ISO marked or egg marked, then we'll say that it is safe, I mean it will not cause any injury to our health, so we eat it, we consume it. But we always forget, and why we are concerned about it, to look at the egg mark or ISI, that it is not contaminated, it cannot harm our health or cannot harm our well-being. But we always forget that during process of its production, when it was being produced, that particular thing, let it be sweet or let it be oil, when the oil was being produced, then we took care of the environment or not. I mean during that process it's might possible we would have harmed the environment in a significant manner. But since that particular oil is not injurious to our health, it is not causing any harm, so we consume it, but we forget the environment. And if that particular product is ISO compliant to ISO 14000 or 14001 compliant to, it means that although it is edible, it is safe to eat, it will not cause any injury to our health, as well as it pertains that when it was being produced, it did not harm the environment too, or the different components of the environment, I mean flora or fauna or endangered species. It did not contaminate the water, it did not contaminate the air, it did not contaminate the soil. So during the process of its production, we have followed the environmental standards. So I mean this should be mandatory. All the companies which are producing goods, they must follow ISO 14000 so that we can know the products which we are using, whether it is for eating or for any other purposes. If it is some electronic item, if it is some clothing item, all of them have followed the environmental norms during the process of its production.
Now, this was the condition when we are talking about the production of the particular product, but after the product has been produced, does this ISO 14000 mark lie with that particular thing?
No. It actually, this ISO 14000 is the responsibility, or this marking is the responsibility of that particular organization where the product was being produced. It simply says that during the process of production, all the requisite environmental norms were followed, and once the things are produced, it is in the hand of the consumers or it is in the hands of vendors. Whether they are following the norms or not, it is their headache. Although consumer cannot have ISO marking or he or she cannot have the ISO compliance, but the vendors can have. Suppose there is a huge mall, there is a big mall where different varieties or different types of consumer products are being sold, they can have it. I mean, it means that during the selling process or during the loading process or during the unloading process, it's all the time that particular shop or shopkeeper or that particular mall is following the environmental standards. So naturally, a mall or a selling booth, selling agency or a supermarket can have these ISO compliances, but consumer cannot have. It is his responsibility to safeguard the environment.
When we are talking about this parameter, that is ISO 14000, while during the production of a particular product, if you talk about the oil as we were discussing as an example only, during the production we know that the extract or the pollutants are produced intentionally or non-intentionally, because when we have to extract something, then pollutants are of course be produced. So is there any parameter that if the pollutants go up or it crosses the particular area, then does this parameter has any connection with that?
Yes, actually this ISOs, like I gave the example of ISO 14000 or 14001, it describes all the things. For all the, I told you there are over 20,000 publications. Suppose it's an oil producing company, so all the mandatory items are described in that particular publication. That if that company is manufacturing oil, so if the extracts or the garbages or the leftover things which are being produced, how it should be disposed of, where it should be disposed of, what are the process, I mean the persons who are disposing it of, whether they are following the compliances mentioned in ISOs or not. So I mean there are detailed points, detailed explanations about how the products or leftover or the waste products should be handled, should be disposed, should be taken care of. And if it is followed, then those agencies or those companies which actually make these ISO standards, they will say that yes, this company during process of its production is following the ISO norms. It means it is now capable, or it should be given the certificate of ISO 14000 or 14001 compliance. And once that company receives the ISO 14001 certificate, that company can mention it on their products like ISI and egg mark that they are ISO 14001 compliance too.
Thus, we can say that this is the eligibility to get ISO 14000.
Yes, yes.
Once one get this ISO 14000 accreditation, then afterwards, does it lies with the company or the brand or the organization throughout the life?
No. It should be revised, perhaps depending upon it could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, or it could be up to 5 years. In fact, these ISO standards are also revised every year. I mean those compliances, those different points of compliances, they are also revised every year. Now last year ISO 14001 standards were there, now ISO 15000, now ISO 14000 2015. Sorry, last year it was ISO 14000 2014 was there, now it is ISO 14000 2015 is there. So every year these points are also revised, because initially like carbon credits etc., people were allowed to emanate good amount of smoke, but later on it was realized no, it should be reduced, and afterwards it was furthermore realized no, it should further be reduced, etc., etc. Similarly it is revised, and in the same manner, depending upon the company's profile, company's capacity, and what actually the end products are, what are the processes involved, whether they are to revise those certificates every year or they should revise those certificates every 5 years or whatever the time given. In fact, all these have also been mentioned in the ISO publications.
So does the company, the brand, the organization, whatever they are producing, they have to submit their yearly reports? So what they are doing?
Yes. Naturally, they are supposed to submit their reports. Yes, they are following the ISO norms, and it is also possible that those people who are responsible for this, they can come and they can check that whether they are following those processes or those methods which were mentioned in the ISO publications, and they actually took oath to follow those processes or not. If they are not following, it means they are cheating, and if they are following, so it means their certification can be continued.
Their certification can be continued, and their certification it is possible that in between, if one feels that the company is not following the norms, the regulation, and the license or their agreement is forfeited.
Withdrawn. Yes, it can be withdrawn, it can be cancelled if they are not following, and afterwards they will not be able to mention that those companies are ISO 14000 compliant. I mean, afterwards, although the consumers can use, it's up to them, or the organizations can use, it's up to them, that because they basically they are the most important thing for a consumer is that the product which they are eating or which they are consuming, it should not be injurious to health. They usually do not bother that whether it has followed the environmental norms or not. In a very recent example, like here Religare Medical Care, which sells the medicines, they usually stopped selling the products which were red marked. I mean, it means that these products are not environmentally compliant with, so they have stopped selling it, and they are selling only those products which are having green mark. It means these products are with compliance to the environment, and so these are the processes. Sometimes it depends upon organizations, sometimes it depends upon the authority.
It means that the continuous vigilance goes on throughout the year till
it is moral responsibility of organizations too that they should follow, and if somehow there is some delay or some problem, they should correct it, they should revise it, and they should further strengthen those commitments towards the environment.
So as we have very less time left over here, in a few words we just want to know through you that ISO 14000 is somewhere is the affirmation that yes, we are responsible towards the society, towards the environment.
Yes, ISO 14000, especially ISOs having so many categories, but ISO 14000, it basically pertains to the environment, and if any organization, if any industry is compliant with the ISO 14000, it says that yes, they are following, they are taking care of the environment, they have been taking care in the past, they are taking care in the present, and they will keep taking care in the future too.
Thank you, sir. Today we had a very good discussion on this very topic, that is ISO 14000. First of all, we try to understand the various perspective, the idea behind ISO 14000, and afterwards through this discussion between you and me, it seems to be very productive. It put forward the different points which we try to gather, so that it becomes easy for the students to understand the whole concept of ISO 14000. Dear friends, if you too have any kind of questions regarding this very topic, that is ISO 14000, then you can mail us at info.cc@nic.in. We would love to solve your queries tomorrow when Dr. Arun Kumar Srivastava visits our studio once again, and we would be discussing further on ISO 14000. So keep tuning us, keep listening us, and for more detailed instructions on this particular lecture, or if you want to wish to see this lecture once again, then you can definitely access it with the help of the YouTube. We will be meeting again tomorrow. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.